In Stephen King's 1977 novel The Shining, the specters that haunt the Overlook Hotel and drive its new caretaker to attempt to axe murder his wife and son are primarily related to gangland executions, organized crime, and the occasional upper-crust suicide. In Stanley Kubrick's film version 3 years later, at least part of the uncanny narrative backstory is that the hotel is built on an indigenous burial ground. Are all these Indian designs authentic? Someone asks. The 70s had seen an increasing awareness of the price indigenous peoples had paid for American expansionism, thanks in no small part to the 1970 history Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown, which rode the bestseller lists for a year. A new interest in Native American culture and folklore had woven itself into some of the horror novels and movies near the turn of the decade. Martin Cruz Smith's 1977 novel Nightwing, set on a Hopi reservation and written by a part Pueblo writer, connected a plague of vampire bats with the depredations of capitalist miners on sacred land. It was a contemporary bestseller among Native activists. And the film adaptation of Whitley Strieber's novel Wolfen was particularly and acidly knowing about how white people would credulously inhale Native American legend, here about shapeshifting into animals, in order to cast indigenous peoples as mystical or uncanny. One of the most prominent versions of this trope, Native Americans, albeit sinned against and so in some ways sympathetic, but also capable of monstrous revenge and therefore somehow monstrous, was the idea of the haunted house as sited on an indigenous burial ground. Broached in the Amityville Horror and The Shining, the trope was deepened in the conversation around 1982's Poltergeist, although not, despite the popular and general insistence, in the movie itself, which in fact explicitly states the cemetery the haunted house is on is not indigenous. That said, the power of the belief suggests an awareness of metaphorical currents the movie presents as an outgrowth of rapacious white capitalism. The terrorized family's patriarch, played by Craig T. Nelson, is in part morally implicated in the horrors because his communal design company has not only built housing on the burial ground, but, unbeknownst to him, failed to move the bodies themselves. Well, no one complained, his boss says when Nelson realizes, and there is a small, fine moment of horror. It is precisely because of past American policies of ethnic cleansing that there is no one around to register such a complaint, except, of course, for the dead. A few years later, in 1990, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act would be passed in response to the real-life instances of this exact phenomenon. While Poltergeist essentially elides the point that there are, in fact, living Native Americans, or for that matter, Native Americans at all, its 1986 sequel addresses the concern and the metaphorical undercurrent by tacking so far in the other direction that it presents its Native American character as a cardboard cutout of saintly mysticism, who then conveniently vanishes from the narrative after fulfilling his purpose of protecting our white characters. Stephen King's 1983 novel Pet Sematary would use an indigenous burial ground and a Native American folkloric tradition, the Wendigo, to account for its zombified homicidal monsters. While King's novel leans heavily on this identification of indigenousness with monstrosity, it also hints at a kind of return of the violently repressed, a time bomb of revenge on those who press on to violate locales that don't belong to them.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.